Hello my lovely students, and welcome to this video on Poseidon and Neptune. Let's just go through what the spec wants. Greek and Roman gods, responsibilities and symbols, what does this mean, yada 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 yada. You can see this on my earlier videos, particularly Zeus. So, Poseidon, Neptune. His common epithets are the Earthshaker, or tamer of horses, or, of course, god of the sea. Earthshaker is an interesting one and suggests he was actually responsible for earthquakes, which was the belief. Possibly, and this is really just my idea, maybe the way the waves hit the land made people think that they could cause earthquakes. Tamer of horses is also interesting, but we'll come to that later. And god of the sea is pretty much a prerequisite. Now, he's not a god who is the sea. There are other gods who are the sea, but he's god of the sea. And this sort of makes him general manager of all the other gods of the sea, with primary responsibility for the sea. His symbols are a trident, fish, hippocamp or seahorse, or a dolphin, a horse, because apparently he invented horses, and of course a great big bushy beard. Oh, and of course the sea. In much later paintings or in Roman mosaic, you often see him against the backdrop of the sea. In Greek art, it's not always that easy to see the sea, funnily enough, and instead he is shown with the previously listed symbols. These are the symbols that you normally see Poseidon with in imagery, both Greek and Roman. Fun fact, the trident, by the way, is actually for fishing. If you were going to go fishing, you might use a line or you might use a spear. Now, when you're trying to aim at the fish, you've got to make sure you allow for the refraction in the water. Where you are looking at the fish in the shallows is not where the fish is. Throwing a spear at it, like I found out from a guy in Mexico I knew who tried to do this, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to hit that fish. But if you have 3 spears all stuck together, you've got 3 times more likely chance of hitting that fish, and thus the trident or 3-tooth implement is a much more useful fishing implement than a spear on its own. The responsibilities of Poseidon or Neptune, or what he's known for, well, he represents elemental forces, storms, waves, and earthquakes. Storms and waves are a given as they often happen over the sea, but as I said before, earthquakes are a little bit different. He also usually produces strong, brutal offspring. He has gods, like the nymphs and sea gods, Triton, Proteus, and more of those. Monsters, such as the Telekinese sea demons and Pegasus, the winged horse. And kings, so many kings of ancient Greece claimed that they were descended, or fathered in fact, by Poseidon, like Bellerophon, even that Theseus, and many, many more. And he's also a god of other water sources, water and springs, as well as the sea. In fact, he was able to strike his trident into the ground and cause springs to come up. He's also apparently the inventor of the horse. That's a fun myth. I'm not going to go into it here, but you can look it up. But he does actually appear to have actually invented the horse. Not even just the little white horses, as they're called, the foam on the top of waves. No, real actual horses. Yeah, look that one up. His birth story. He was born of Rhea by Kronos and eaten by Kronos, then sicked back up by Kronos when Zeus tricked him into drinking poison. So he's got the same birth story as Zeus and Hera so far. The oldest of the Olympians all have this same birth story, except for Zeus, who's got the bit where he gets them all back out again. Later, when they had defeated the Titans, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, the 3 male Olympians, drew lots to see what they would rule over, and Poseidon drew the middle lot, so got the sea, while Zeus got the sky, and Hades drew the shortest lot, and got the underworld. And yes, I have drawn him smiling there, but that might not necessarily be the case because he got all the paperwork. Note, the ladies did not get a chance to draw any lots. Hey, patriarchy. Now let's look at the etymology. Poseidon derives from the Greek posis, meaning husband or lord, from the Proto-Indo-European potis, and da, which possibly means earth, but is really quite uncertain. But if we are to take it as that reading, it means sort of lord of the earth, and he does appear to have been a very early god, seen in fact on Mycenaean Linear B tablets as Poseidon. He seems to have had much more importance and more responsibility in the Mycenaean period, so possibly was a different god that grew into being the Poseidon that the later Greeks knew. In Rome, Neptune has an ancient word root nev, cloud, which is the source of the Latin word nebula for fog or mist or cloud, and so there's a sense of dampness and wetness, and he is thus wet because he is god of the sea and other water. It's a little bit literal, really, isn't it? The major temple for Poseidon in Greece was the Temple of Poseidon at Cape Sunion. It was on 60-meter high cliffs about 70 kilometers from Athens, overlooking the sea, which of course is a very good location for the god of the sea, and often these sanctuaries were chosen for their natural beauty and link with the god. Poseidon was an incredibly important god to the Greeks because seafaring was incredibly important to them, and thus they needed someone to be able to worship in order to feel safer about going to sea. In Rome, his major temple was in the southern part of the Campus Martius, the plain of war, and he gained importance through Rome's expansion across the Mediterranean, especially after the Battle of Actium, after which Agrippa, the best mate of Augustus, built a basilica in honour of Neptune. So they have very similar importances across Greece and Rome because the sea was still so important to trade and warfare and just general travel. In both Greek and Roman mythology and art, Poseidon and Neptune are seen as a bearded man with trident, a throne, and horses. Again, he's identical between the two, meaning that his responsibilities did not really change between his worship in Greece and his worship in Rome. Let's have some stories about Poseidon. The pursuit of Odysseus is one of the most engaging because it takes place in the Odyssey. Odysseus angers the sea god by blinding his son Polyphemus, a cyclops. I've got another video about that. Look up Book 9 of the Odyssey. Polyphemus asks Poseidon to curse Odysseus to never return home, or at least to return late with no crew, no riches, and reduced in status, to come home late in a wretched state, helpless and alone with trouble at home. Poseidon agrees and sends storms to thwart Odysseus on his way home until Odysseus is trapped on the island with Calypso, a goddess, who stops him from going home for a further 7 years. Athene is only able to get the other gods to agree to allow Odysseus to return home when Poseidon is away partying with the Ethiopians and can't say no. Another very famous story of Poseidon is the naming of Athens. The first king of Athens, King Cecrops or Kekrops, who was actually part human and part snake, wanted to find a patron deity for his city-state. He called on Athene and Poseidon, and their rivalry was so intense they almost went to war over it. Just as they were about to attack each other, Athene very cleverly suggested that they should instead hold a contest for the city, with King Cecrops or Kekrops as the judge. The best gift would win. On the Acropolis, Poseidon struck the earth with his trident, and a spring came up, but it was salty. When it was Athene's turn, she buried a seed, which grew into an olive tree. This turned out to be a much more useful gift, if you see the comic on the left, and Athene won. Poseidon apparently sent a drought in anger. Yes, the spring wasn't the only thing that was salty. In a third set of stories, we have two very similar sea monster punishments. In our first story, Queen Cassiopeia of Ethiopia made a hubristic boast that her daughter Andromeda was more beautiful than the sea nymphs, the Nereids, the daughters of Nereus. On their behalf, because, general manager of the sea, Poseidon sent a sea monster, Cetus or Cetus, to ravage the land as punishment. Andromeda was chained to a rock as a sacrificial feast for the monster to hopefully make it go away. Luckily for her, the hero Perseus was flying back on Pegasus from just having beheaded Medusa, at which point Pegasus flew out of Medusa's body, but another story for another day. He saw Andromeda, flew down and rescued her by using the head of Medusa to turn Cetus to stone. A very similar story concerns the Trojans. Poseidon helped the Trojan king Laomedon to build the walls around Troy. Laomedon then refused to pay him, going back on his word. This was dumb in the extreme and hubristic in the extreme. In revenge, Poseidon sent a sea monster to ravage Troy. Soothsayers told Laomedon to chain his daughter Hesione to a rock as a sacrificial feast for the monster to hopefully send it away. Are we seeing a pattern here? The hero Heracles, or Hercules as the Romans later called him, returning from battling the Amazons, again, long story, another part of your course, saw Hesione and came and rescued her, demanding Laomedon's immortal horses first as payment before he completed the deed. These immortal horses had been received by Laomedon from Zeus in payment for Zeus having kidnapped and raped his son Ganymede. Laomedon again didn't pay Heracles, and Heracles threatened war. I wonder if Laomedon ever learned about not upsetting people and causing wars in Troy. Clearly his grandson Paris didn't get that memo. So overall, Poseidon and Neptune. He's one of the most important gods because he's male. He is part of the system of patriarchy. He is also responsible for the sea, an incredibly important aspect of life for the Greeks and the Romans. Like the sea, he is dangerous if not taken seriously. His stories remind us of the danger of having hubris or being hubristic. And he is a very salty god. You must not upset Poseidon, whatever you do. Because like the sea, he'll turn on you in an instant. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit subscribe so that you get the rest of these Olympian videos that I'm doing. And also go to my social channels where I am at Greek Myth Comics on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can also go to GreekMythComics.com for more Greek myth comic-y goodness. Thanks for watching and have a great day.